I do not know if you realize that, but up to this point we haven't done anything RSS related except declaring these three variables of high-level RSS type. So let's hope that we are going to start doing something about RSS in OpenStream. F2, and I'm in it. Okay, parameter is the ID of the stream, and we got that from the tree view where it was stored. Now what do? First, we search inside the file for all the information about the stream. What do we have in it? Stream ID, category ID, name, and URL. That's all. Okay? That's all there is to define a stream. If we find it, then loads the RSS stream. Look at that. And what are we doing here? We are using a function called RSS initialize, giving to it as a parameter the URL of the stream coming from the file, telling the function that it's coming from a URL, which tells me that it can come from something else, and putting that in our infamous now variable of high level. Look at that, it tells you it's a RSS stream variable. So we're putting a stream inside a stream variable. Nothing more simple than that. So what is RSS initialized able to do? Clearly at this point you should do this F1 and read the whole thing. I'm just going to give you the skinny on it. RSS initialized is able to work on either a stream that is coming from a URL, any type of URL you can think of, as long as it's returning an XML file formatted for RSS. It's also able to work with directly a string. So if you are able to get an XML file containing an RSS feed from any possible communication mean, including somebody bringing it to you on a floppy disk, and you still have a floppy reader of course, then you can just read that file, get the content in a string and putting it in there instead of the URL directly the string content. And of course it has a third possibility to directly read an XML file from disk. So basically it initializes your stream variable based on the content of an XML file wherever it is coming from, which means that in there you already have your whole RSS feed inside your RSS stream variable. So this is the magic here, clearly, no question about that. So what are we doing that? Okay, putting a message, putting a progress bar. Okay, because clearly it's going to take some time to read, it's over the internet. Opening the RSS stream, another message, multitask to let things be displayed. Okay, and then what are we doing here? We are working on our variable, and we are working on one of the properties of the variable, channel, because it's true, a RSS feed can have several channels, and we are looking if there is more than one. If yes, at least one, sorry, not more than one. And if yes, we are loading the main channel in it. And how are we doing that? Okay, we're taking channel of 1 from the RSS stream variable and putting it in a channel variable. Look at that. It's that simple. So we're taking, first reading the stream, and from the stream reading the channel directly from one variable to another inside our application. That's easier than that. It couldn't be. Loading the publication, okay, and refreshes the table. Is that it? Nothing else? Well, no. We are clearly doing the display, selecting the first line, and executing the process of the selection of the first line. And that's it. Wow, that's magic. We are going to have a look at what's going on. Now, if it's not a channel, we are just displaying an error. Okay, nothing else. If we didn't find a stream, okay, and that's it. All that is just error display. So the whole thing is happening between here and there. You have the initialization and the table display. What do we know at this point? The whole thing up till now was doing nothing related to the stream. And then in this OpenStream function, we have two things, and two things really only. One is to initialize the stream with the RSS initialize function and with a URL. So that clearly reads the feed from the internet. It reads the XML file. And then it takes everything from the XML file and put it in our RSS stream variable. And from there, we are just doing a table display. That's all. We are not filling the table, we are not doing anything, just a table display. So clearly also some of the magic must be happening inside the table itself. Well, let's have a look. That's what I find really interesting when you analyze a problem like that. You see ways of doing things that you would not use from time to time and just discover new ways of doing things. So how is that table working on a RSS feed? Okay, let's have a look. This is the table. There is nothing in the code. I just pressed F2, so there is nothing in the code, so it's not filling by code. Okay, so it means that it's linked directly to something. And look at that. The table news content is, whoa, it is an array of RSS entry directly inside a variable. So we saw that we had that RSS stream. In the RSS stream that we read with RSS initialized, we took the channel, the main channel, the channel 1, and put it in gMyChannel. And in this channel, we have here an array of entries, each entry with different information in it. And we are linking directly the table to this array of this variable. Now that is powerful. So it means that your table can not only be browsed by programming, filled by programming, it can be on a file or query, but it can be, look at that, on a variable. And this variable, that variable is of a very high level type because clearly it is containing your whole RSS feed. And each entry of this array is going to contain one line of your feed. The stored variable is, okay, current element is gMyChannel entry of n of the current line. Okay, so now we have a table where each line is one entry inside a channel of RSS feed. If you're lost, it's okay. Remember that. You go step by step and you dig in little by little and you arrive at that. And that is clearly something extremely powerful that lets you manipulate an RSS feed just by linking a table or a looper. You could do clearly the same thing directly to the basically the XML file once it's been going through one RSS stream variable, one RSS stream channel, and that's it. More powerful than that, it's hard. So that is really, really, really impressive. Now the last thing that we need to know is how do we display one line of this into that. And look at that. AX HTML Explorer. What is that thing? That thing, initializing, okay, that's not what I want to look at now. That thing is an ActiveX field. And what ActiveX field? Microsoft Web Browser. So this, just like in the example about OLE automation with Excel, this is Internet Explorer used as a field. And we're going to see how it's used and why. Okay, at this point, we know that the tree view is just a list of RSS feed. We know that when clicking on a stream, we are getting the stream in basically 2 lines of code. We know that even perhaps more powerful, the table is doing the whole work automatically by linking to an array inside a variable of type channel. It's directly linked to the RSS feed inside the variable. It's really amazing stuff, because imagine the number of lines of code that you would have to write in order to do the same thing. So that is really some powerful stuff. Now, we also know that there must be something happening when selecting a line. And if you saw earlier when we are looking at the code of the table, it's a function called display entry. And now we're going to have a look at what it takes to display the whole content of one line of a feed. So we are displaying into this field, and we saw that this field is an ActiveX with Internet Explorer inside. That's already something that we saw in another course, in the OLE automation course. But here they are doing something that looks very interesting in the initialization of the field. So let's have a look what they are doing. Look at that. ActiveX event and 5 different ActiveX events. So clearly ActiveX event is the function that you use to manage an event happening inside the code of your ActiveX. And what are there? Well, it depends on the ActiveX. So once again, that's something that you would have to find on MSDN, on Google, and so on and so forth. And here, well, they did the search for you, so you have a good starting point. Clearly, well, when something is happening on the Internet Explorer ActiveX, so when the download is complete, end of download for an HTML page, start of download for an HTML page, progress bar for downloading an HTML page. Look at that. When this thing is able to display a gauge when the progress bar, when the page is loading. You can do things when the page start loading. So clearly it's extremely powerful and very easy. Let's have a look at what's in there. Oh, when the download is complete, we are doing nothing. It's a local procedure. When the download begins, we are doing nothing. When the page is loading, we are doing, each time I'm just clicking on the string and pressing F2, if you're wondering. Okay, what are we doing if, okay, we are doing progress change and, okay, displaying the progress in the progress bar. Okay, that's simple enough. I'm pressing Ctrl F2 to come back. If are we in secure mode, what are we doing? We are just putting an image, either if it's secure or insecure. And look at that, mix 128, 40-bit, always the same image. Okay, so we don't care. Either it's HTTPS or it's HTTP, and we are putting an icon if it's the case. And if the caption of the status bar, link rollover, etc. Okay, what are we doing in that case? Are we doing something? If text equals done, then okay, we are not doing a lot of things. If we have any other text than done, then we are putting that in STC message. Okay, well, that's not very important. Just give you an idea of what you can do with this particular ActiveX. I'm sure there are many other events available that you would have to find. So what else are we doing in this initialization of the field? That's something that's done once when the window is opened. We are generating a default file in the directory of the internet cache. So in sysdir of sr internet cache, we are creating a file called news.html by saving cs html default, and here we have the content that appears automatically in the tooltip. Remember, that's one of the constants that were defined at the beginning of the window. So what is in it? Just some basic HTML code, body, style, font family, okay, empty, break, no publication is selected, okay, and body HTML. Okay, so this is just a basic HTML page created on the fly to display no publication is selected by default in the field. Nothing to it. And here, once it's created, we are displaying it with the navigate function of the ActiveX. That's it. That's all there is for this thing. Okay, now what are we doing to display something into it? Let's have a look. So clearly it's inside the table and it's inside the display entry. So we know that we have a display entry function, and we're going to have a first look at it. So to do that, the easiest way is to select the table, do F2. We have in the selecting arrow of table news area the display entry, F2, and we're in it. What do we have in it? Well, the first thing that we are doing is getting the identifier of the entry from the table. Okay, and then we are searching for the corresponding RSS entry object. Okay, what is that? Clearly it's a loop. It's a loop that is going from 1 to the number of that's occurrence, numbers of entries inside the gMyChannel variable. Remember, the gMyChannel is the variable that the table is linked in, and each of the line of the table is displaying one of the line of the array of entries that is inside the variable. So clearly we're going through the whole array. And what are we doing? We are testing if the ID of the table that we got here from the table is the same than the ID, the link here of the entry in questions. Okay, so we are getting the line in the array matching the line inside the table. And then what are we doing? Look at that, our third variable, the gMyEntry. So now we have a variable of entry type, and we are putting in it the entry from the array inside the higher level variable. So this is equivalent to saying, okay, in my table I have an ID, and I'm doing a hreadseek of this ID inside my file to get all my my whole record. Well, here I'm getting my whole entry from the array inside the variable. Okay, that's the same thing. Got it. Now, what are we doing once we have this entry? Well, first we are looking if the description of this entry is empty. Clearly we're doing Unicode to NC because, well, it's a Unicode string. We are working on the web most of the time, and we are looking if we have information in it. If it's empty, we don't have any description, then we are using the link of the entry, which clearly based on the name is a URL, to display a page inside the ActiveX Internet Explorer. Okay, so if we don't have a description, we are displaying directly the content. That makes sense. Okay. Now if we do have a description, what are we doing? Well, we are doing the same thing that we were doing earlier in the initialization of the ActiveX. We are creating an HTML page on the disk, and this HTML page contains some basic HTML stuff, then the description of the entry because it's not empty, and then look at that, the link to the whole thing. So okay, that whole sequence of code is, do we have a description? No. Display the whole page, the original page. Yes, display the description because it's faster, and a link to the whole page. Okay, makes sense. That is easy enough. So at this point we are able to display a whole RSS feed. Isn't that great? I'm sure there are a few other things that we should look at. Well, okay, we had our first look to display entry, but personally that gave me a few questions that I would like to get answer to. So we're going to dig a little deeper and see if things could be done differently, and if yes, how they would look. So the question is, why a display entry? Well, clearly we saw that in some cases the information is in the description, and in some cases the information is not, and you have to display directly the content of the link coming from the internet. This means that clearly the publisher are not following one particular schema. Now, would it be possible to display directly in the table? Well, let's have a look at what could be done. If we go inside the table, we see that already there is this colon ID that we used as a unique identifier, and it's invisible. And the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm curious, I'm going to select it, make it visible, and have a look at what it contains. Okay, here we are. So I'm going first to do this, so we have the ID also, okay, and this to display it. Okay, so what do we have here? Okay, we have our title, it didn't change, no problem. And here the ID that we have is in fact a full URL. Okay, so the unique identifier of our RSS entry is a unique URL allowing us to access it. And if we have a look in here, we saw that we were working on it, and look at that, it is the same thing, string handler class. Okay, so what we're displaying in the link is at the same time our unique ID. Now that's an interesting information. So to get back to the original question, could we display directly the description inside the table? Well, we saw that, let's call it description. We saw that the description was coming from the entry level, and all this is linked already to the entry level. So if here we're linked to the author, called description could be linked to the description. Let's see if it works. If we do this and save, test, and we display something. Time to load it from the web. Okay. Let's have a look at what we have. We have our ID, okay, and we have our description. So clearly it's not very pretty because there's a lot of things displayed in here, but we could display directly. Now we saw that it's not a good idea because in some cases there's no description and you need to display directly the whole shebang, but depending of what RSS feed you are working on, you can display it directly inside your table without even a field below it. Okay, it's good to know. Now, why are we using an HTML field to do all that? Couldn't we display the description directly in an HTML field inside of the ActiveX? Well, let's try. What would that work? Let's see. I'm taking one edit field saying that it's going to be an HTML field, and go in the link, variable, my channel, entry, description. So yes, I could directly, absolutely directly display in an HTML field. So why use the ActiveX? Well, with the ActiveX, here we're displaying the description only, but remember that we are in fact in the display entry, we are making an HTML page containing both the description and a link to the whole thing. We could do that with just an HTML field and the link being inside a button or link that we set up on the side. So it would be another way of doing that. So yes, it's possible to do that inside HTML field too, directly linked. So it's doable, and it's doable. Okay, good to know. Depending on the case, we may want to do that. Now, why not? Why did they do things that way? Well, we already saw that according to the code, in some cases there is no description. The description is empty. If the description is empty, then you need some conditional code, and conditional code doesn't like direct linking, which explains the way it's done by code when displaying a thing. So this clearly has been done in order to work with different type of content. So also, depending of the stream that you're reading, you may have a type of content that is different than just text, and we're going to come back to that later. But clearly you may want to display that in one field or another field depending on what you get. Now, in some cases you also need to massage the data. What does that mean? Well, maybe you saw it or maybe you didn't when I was clicking around, but there is a bug about the ellipses. Let's have a look at the bug. So when we are working here and we display this, look at that. Look at this here. What is that? Well, for those of you who know HTML, this is a keyword, or more precisely, it is part of a keyword. And what does that mean? Well, this is the ellipsis, the dot, dot, dot. And clearly, here, the code is incomplete because there should be a P here. It should be a helip, dot, semicolon. So there is a bug somewhere. Let's have a look at where exactly. If we go inside the display entry, of course I already corrected the bug, so I know where it is. Well, we are displaying directly the description of the entry. We are not putting any helip in it, as you can see, which means that this helip is inside the description, and it means that the RSS stream that we are getting is malformed. There is a bug on the producer side. Of course, first thing to do is to tell them to correct it, but the second thing to do is to modify this and replace it. I'm sorry, I put some space in order not to overwhelm you immediately. Let's have a look. This is the correction, correcting the a helip. So what am I doing? I'm replacing inside my description here the malformed code by the correct code, and I'm saying that I should ignore the case. So now if I retry my code and I'm displaying the same thing, look at that, dot dot dot, and this time, each time I'm changing something, I have this dot 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 the way it was intended. So as you can see, in some cases you're going to get a stream that is malformed. You have to be able to deal with it. Now there is a second bug. What is that second bug? Well, look at that. We are in a case where we have the bug. Look, here I just have hi, comma, and nothing after that. And here I have hi, comma, and the next line. Why? How come here clearly there's a carriage return and here it's not? Well, if you look at the code as it's coming in, and for that we are going to put a breakpoint here and do it again. And if we look at the description, you can see that after PC Software created a new consulting offer via video conferencing, you have carriage return, carriage return. But this is not HTML break. We should have here this and this instead of the carriage return, carriage return. So this means that our text here is not in HTML. It is pure text. So this is my third version of the code to manage both problems at the same time. Well, clearly the text that I was receiving was not in HTML properly. It was in text, but still there was this HTML tag in it. So if I just do a text to HTML and there is already an HTML tag in it, it's going to be a problem. So instead, what I'm doing here is looking if there is this HTML tag in it, and if there isn't it, removing it. If it was in it, then I'm putting dot 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 instead by hand, and then I'm transforming that as from text to HTML and displaying the result. And now with that code, when I go onto this forum and I remove the breakpoint, works better this way. There we are. As you can see, now I have the ellipsis and the carriage return. Isn't that great? Hi, carriage return when I'm trying to, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, it is sometimes necessary to massage the data that you are receiving from an outside source just because it is not correctly formatted. And because of that, it is a very good idea to use some code to do your final display, and depending on what you're doing with it, correcting it on the fly. So there was a second bug with the carriage return. We had a malformed string coming our way, partly HTML, partly not HTML, and the HTML was not correctly formatted. Yeah, do not think that everything that is coming from the outside world is going to come in perfect. So is there something else that we should look at in this particular project? Well, I think that we went through all the important stuff. We are able now to display an RSS stream, which is great. But I realized something, I saw something inside this project, and I would like to show it to you. I saw that here, okay, we have our main window and then the manage category, manage stream, properties. Okay, that's pretty obvious what these things are doing. They're managing the different record in the different files. So that is basic stuff. We don't need to look at that. But look at that. There are classes in here, it looks like. But what classes? We didn't do anything with classes anywhere. So let's have a look. Well, look at that. That's folder, subfolder, sub-subfolder, and there is nothing in any of this. Okay, what does that mean? It's extremely strange. And look at the name, RSS stream, RSS channel. It looks exactly like the name of the variables that we have been using. So what is that? Well, I have absolutely no inside information from PCSoft, of course, but for me, this is history. And let me explain what I understand from that. Before there was all these high-level functions doing all the work for you, there was nothing. And as usual in the WinDev world, some functionality starts with an example as W language code. And I'm pretty sure that if we go back a few versions of WinDev, we're going to find the same WD RSS reader example, but without the direct access to the variable and the array inside the variable and all that. And instead, we're going to find some direct W language code organized in a set of classes inside these different folders. And if that's the case, and I didn't have the time to check it out, but if that's the case, it means that you would have an example of the whole code that is used to, in fact, do what is done in the high-level stuff. Why is that interesting? Well, two reasons. First, as owner of a license of the last version of the tool, of the current version 18, you are entitled to use any of the previous version of the tool if you need it for any reason. And these versions are available for download on the PCSoft website with all their examples, which means that any of you can access the old version of the example and see how it was done. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, what happens if this high-level stuff doesn't work in one specific RSS stream that you really need to be able to access? Well, basically, you're stuck in the water, except if you can ask PCSoft to correct it for you and wait for them to do the correction. Now, if you realize that there is an example somewhere on how it's done directly in W language, then you can go back to that version, look at it, and basically do it yourself by code and modify it for the code to work with this specific example that didn't work. And that, for me, is something that is extremely interesting. Now, I think that this is what happened here for one reason. I saw the same thing happening with the different function of the W language during the time I've been working with it. I saw first example coming either with the program or with LSTs, and this example suddenly 1 or 2 versions later were in fact one function of the W language directly. So this is something that they are doing all the time. They are introducing new stuff as a W language procedure, classes and things like that, and then there's some high-level stuff that is happening afterwards. And now, if you think of it that way, you realize that your high-level variable that we saw before with the properties are in fact objects of classes that they are managing behind the scene. And for those of you who have followed my object-oriented procedure course, You remember that I was telling you that with that system you can create your own programming language. Well, this is a perfect example on how it's done. They created a series of classes, and now in W language you declare a variable. You don't know that it's an object, but you declare a variable of, in fact, the RSS stream class, of the RSS channel class, of the RSS entry class. And all these properties that you have inside each variable are in fact either a function or members of the class. So we are really going back to the basics of the object-oriented programming here, so I refer you to my other course, but I find that extremely interesting to see how they're doing things behind the scene, and we can do the same thing in W language. Now, to go back to our RSS course, if we run that project, we have a way of displaying any type of RSS inside this. And you saw that to do that, you needed 3 variables, 1 function to initialize the stream, and a table directly linked to your feed, plus a few lines of code to display this or that depending if something is there or not, and if it's not, it would display the whole page. And this is just, as you can see, displaying the whole page of the PCSoft website. So RSS feed, easy enough, no problem. You can now consume as many RSS feed in your project as you want. And I assure you that now that you've seen how to analyze the problem, how to analyze the example that is coming with all the help file and all this kind of thing, if you do the same thing on the RSS producing side, you will have the exact same result. It's not going to be any harder than that. So good luck now with your development with RSS.